The professional discussion is a central element of every moderation visit. It is the chance to talk through written evidence to validate teachers' assessment judgments. It should provide a shared understanding of how judgments have been reached and the opportunity to discuss any gaps in evidence against the teacher assessment frameworks. This video will focus on a scenario that you may come across during a moderation visit. Having reviewed evidence, the moderator must challenge the standard awarded to a Key Stage 1 pupil. They will handle a sensitive conversation and discuss the procedure for re-moderation. The professional discussion will, at times, prove challenging. When handled effectively, it should be a supportive, collaborative, yet challenging process, which could result in some built-in CPD for the teachers you work alongside. The ultimate aim is, of course, to ensure that judgments are consistent with national standards. On occasion, you may come across a situation where consensus is not reached, despite careful handling and systematic review of evidence. This video will outline the subsequent procedure to follow in such a situation. In this scenario, the teacher, an experienced practitioner, has awarded the judgment of working at the expected standard. The moderator and teacher have spent a short time looking at the pupil's set of work together at the point we join them.
So tell me about this child and their writing.
So this child is one of the expected children in my class. We have had some issues with attendance. Unfortunately, they've had 3 weeks off with illness, which is quite a big chunk. But I'm not too concerned because they're a really, really quick learner, a really good support network at home with the family. So I know that they're going to catch up really quickly. But I do have a piece of writing to show you.
Fantastic. We'll have a look at that and we'll compare them and see what evidence we've got.
Fantastic. So this piece, we've been learning about Africa and African animals. So we've obviously read Hand of Surprise. They really enjoyed it. They've acted it out in small groups using puppets and then written a retell of the story. And I think they've done so well with it. There's evidence of clear demarcation of the sentences. I think we've got some good coherence going on with the time adverbials. So we've got after that, a while later. After obviously is a common exception word as well, and it's spelt correctly, which is great. We've got some coordination in there. They've used and a few times accurately. Also some expanded noun phrases as well, which we've been working on, so I was really pleased with that. Delicious fruits, heavy basket, green, avocado. So yeah, I'm just really pleased with this piece of writing.
Yeah, I can definitely see some of the elements of expected. So again, like you said, the demarcating the sentences, the coherence that's in there. Have we got any other pieces we can look at for extra evidence?
Well, this is the strongest piece, but as I've said, that they're a really quick learner, so I am convinced that every piece of writing that we do from now on is just going to be even more examples of evidence for expected.
The teacher refers to the Teacher Assessment Framework, or TAF, regularly and demonstrates a good knowledge of the statements within the expected standard. She exemplifies her points and relates her statements to the framework by focusing on a pupil script. You may have noted that the teacher's textual references were, while sounded valid, limited to 1 or 2 pieces of work only. As a result, the moderator requires additional evidence to validate the judgment. While the teacher's knowledge of pupils can inform judgments, they must be based on demonstrable evidence. This ensures that judgments are objective and consistent between classes and schools. Pause the video to reflect on what your next steps would be in this situation. Now watch the next part of the conversation.
I agree that in this piece we do have lots of evidence of some of these expected standards. Can we look at any other pieces for additional evidence?
Yeah, sure. We can have a look at this one. So this is a nice recent piece. We've been learning about hedgehogs. So after some research, they've written a report. Again, I'm really pleased with this piece. It shows a bit more of the punctuation they're capable of using independently. So we've got question marks, for example, where do they live, used appropriately. And they've also managed to do a list with some commas, which I'm really pleased with, just in this section here about the different things that they eat. So I'm really pleased with this one as well.
Thank you. I can definitely see we've got those lovely question marks there. That's really, really good to see. If we do look at the statements for expected, obviously we do have to evidence all of these. So if you could maybe point out some of the coordination or subordination this child's able to use.
So there's bits of coordination. We've got an and again, which I know we had in the previous one. The subordination, maybe not in this piece, but I do know I've seen lots of examples of them in lessons using subordination. So I know they're capable of doing it. So I will be collecting more pieces that'll be able to show some subordination. So maybe not in this piece.
And what about the handwriting? It's not got the correct spacing in this piece, but are there any of the pieces that do show that?
So again, it was a bit stronger in the previous piece. Maybe not so much in this piece. Now you've pointed that out, actually. But again, I know that if I mention that to the child, I know that they will be able to apply that into the next piece of writing that they do, I'm sure.
Yeah. Coming back to this piece, the statement about the coherence, which is quite an important one, we want across the collection. Do we have more evidence of that one?
Again, probably sound like a broken record now, but I think that first piece was really strong. And again, I, as class teacher, I know this child really well, and I know that they're a coherent writer, so I know that I will be able to collect more pieces. Maybe just not in this example particularly.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that all the bits that you've talked about are there. We do need to see it across that collection, and we are talking about the child now, not the child, in a few weeks' time. So I think we might need to get out the expected statements and look at those and just talk about those, or we can look at the exemplification materials and compare those.
Okay.
In this situation, the teacher cannot provide sufficient written evidence to convince the moderator that this child is yet working consistently at the expected standard. Evidence for most statements has been discussed, but not all. This is key. In order for the standard to be validated, all statements must be evidenced. In this scenario, the moderator remains empathetic but factual. Having used the teacher assessment frameworks and exemplification materials at both standards, the moderator and teacher have identified gaps in evidence, which suggests that the pupil is indeed working towards the expected standard at this point in time, but is evidencing most statements for the standard above. So what happens next?
So looking at the working towards statements, the child does meet all of these. Because the child's only got a few statements missing from the expected standard, and we have agreed all the other judgments so far today, I think this child might be a candidate for remoderation.
Oh, great.
I've got some information here about the remoderation process and what that involves. So it only applies when a child has the potential to meet that next standard before the assessment deadline. Because it's only a couple of statements that are missing, and you've got quite a few weeks until the assessment deadline, you can take this back for external moderation.
Fantastic. So we've got a few weeks left. So I've got time to put together a few more pieces of
Yeah,
writing.
so more evidence for the statements that were missing, just to evidence all of those ones. So if we look at the standards, so it was particularly around that coherence, just additional evidence for that because it was strong in two of those pieces.
So was that the subordination, do you think?
The subordination would really help with that as well, so having more evidence of that. And then another piece where we can see the handwriting a little bit clearer. So if you will be able to produce additional pieces before the end of the window, that could go for remoderation.
Okay.
This pupil has not yet demonstrated a small number of the pupil can statements for the expected standard, but has the potential to do so. The school and the moderator both agree that this pupil will potentially be able to consistently demonstrate the relevant skills before the deadline for the teacher assessment data submission, and for this reason is suitable for remoderation. Remoderation is not a method of further moderation to avoid appeals, nor is it part of the appeals process. The local authority's record of the visit must clearly set out the next steps for pupils such as this. In this case, the teacher assessment judgments were not validated in full. However, the moderator believes that the pupil has the potential to reach the expected standard before the final submission deadline. So this pupil will be externally remoderated with the need for a local authority review of evidence. In situations where the moderator has been able to fully validate the school's teacher assessment judgments, a slightly different path would follow. Where a pupil has the potential to achieve the next standard before data submission, an internal remoderation without the need to provide evidence for review by the local authority can be undertaken. Given the short time between a moderation visit and the final submission deadline, cases of remoderation will be rare. Remoderation is not always an appropriate route. On occasion, the school may consider the appeals procedure. Where consensus cannot be reached, Each local authority must have appeal arrangements for schools which, after escalation, includes a second external moderation review by a different local authority. You will have introduced the appeals procedure at the start of the moderation visit, and if any changes were made, agreed or not, you must revisit your local authority's procedure for appeals at this stage. Guidance on the appeals process can be found at www.gov.uk/STA.